Alright everyone, I hope you bear with me as I go through several episodes today because I'm a little behind in keeping up with recording some of this material. I have a civil procedure to take care of, I have a criminal law to take care of, and I also have a couple of days of torts to take care of, and then later today I'll need to do a little recording of our last lecture of torts for the week. And so there's going to be a variety of episodes coming out, probably between 5 and 10. I'm not 100% sure yet, but with that said, let's actually go ahead and jump into civil procedure. Civil procedure, if you recall from what we've been talking about so far, we've talked about diversity jurisdiction. So, in order for a court to hear a case, there needs to be subject matter jurisdiction, and that pertains to if it's in a federal court. So if you're in a federal court, you need to have subject matter jurisdiction. Underneath subject matter jurisdiction, you have federal question jurisdiction, and you have diversity jurisdiction. We've been focusing recently on diversity jurisdiction, and diversity jurisdiction has two requirements. First, there needs to be complete diversity, which is what we focused on last time. And second, there needs to be an amount in controversy, meaning the amount in dispute, the monetary amount, the damages that the party is asking for, exceeds a certain number. Right now, according to 1332A, that number is set at $75,000 and really 1 cent, because it needs to exceed $75,000. So if it lands on $75,000, it's no good. So it needs to exceed $75,000 in order for diversity jurisdiction to hear a case. And once again, remember that these are all state claims. So let's actually talk about amount in controversy more in depth. We have a couple big takeaways that I want to note. First of all, when you're trying to determine the amount of controversy, there's pretty much two stages. During stage 1, you can say that there's pre-trial, and then stage 2 would be during trial. Stage 1, you're going to assume that the amount of controversy has been met. It's going to be up to the defendant to say, no, we can't hear this in a federal court because the damages that they are saying that they have does not exceed $75,000. And the plaintiff in that case is going to say, yes, we do exceed $75,000. And so this can be heard in a federal court. At least that's really what happens during the pre-trial. During trial, it's that burden shifts to the plaintiff to say, yes, we actually did meet this $75,000, and we have to prove it. So pre-trial, defendants have to prove that they don't meet it. During trial, the plaintiffs have to prove that they did meet it. The interesting thing to note here, though, is that this is actually quite often reversed in actual practice, and that is because plaintiffs would prefer to be in state court and defendants would prefer to most typically be in federal court. And so a lot of the time when it actually is in this pretrial stage, they're trying to swap roles to where the defendant's saying, yes, they can meet that $75,000, and the plaintiffs are like, no, we don't have that as many damages. And then once it actually gets to trial, those swap where the defendants say, no, their damages are zero. They can't get anything. And then the plaintiffs are like, yeah, we far exceeded the $75,000. Because at that point, that's after the courts have determined whether or not there is subject matter jurisdiction. Okay, we have a case that actually outlines this and pretty well. Is Diefenthal versus CAB. What happened in this case is that the plaintiffs had purchased a first-class smoking ticket in airplanes. This is back when airplanes allowed smoking. So they had purchased a first-class smoking ticket, But when they arrived at the airport, their ticket person, the flight attendant said no, and they said it brusquely, mind you. They said it brusquely that we don't have any first-class smoking seats left. You're going to have to go and sit in first-class non-smoking. So the parties were angry. They said that the company had breached their contract and caused them to suffer extreme humiliation and embarrassment in front of the other passengers. And so in their controversy claim, they demanded $50,000 in damages. Note, at this time, the amount in controversy requirement was set at $10,000. So they had claimed $50,000. However, the court said there's no way that it's even possible to a legal certainty that you even reach the $10,000 requirement. And how can you prove this? So what kind of things do you show for damages? Well, here in this case, they could say the breach of contract. It was probably, let's be generous. Back in that time, $100 was a lot more money than it is now. A smoking ticket versus a non-smoking ticket, $100 makes about sense. So they would have $100 in damages there, and then maybe you can say that you want to attribute some damages to their injuries that they had occurred of embarrassment. But can you honestly say without any further evidence that those two things are going to exceed $10,000, let alone the $50,000? The attorney and the plaintiffs here obviously thought that they had reached the $50,000 mark because that's what they asked for. They said that it was in good faith. However, because to a legal certainty, that's the test, to a legal certainty, the amount of controversy is not met. So what's our test? So from this case and from another case, St. Paul Mercy Indemnity Co. versus Red Cab Co., our test is that if the claim is made on good faith, the plaintiff's claim is made on good faith, then we're going to have the amount of controversy met unless if there is a lack of legal certainty. So, unless if there is legal certainty that it is not met. So, good faith plus the lack of legal certainty is going to equal the amount of controversy met. Good faith without the legal certainty, or rather with legal certainty that it's not met, is going to result in it not being met. Probably didn't say that very well, but that's the test. As far as how you can add damages together, this is called aggregate claims. These are the rules are kind of a little bit arbitrary. They don't make as intuitive sense, but we do have a couple of rules. What this is just saying is that you can combine several claims together under a case to actually figure out the damages that is in dispute for the amount of controversy requirement. So the basic rule is that the plaintiff or several plaintiffs can combine against one defendant to reach the amount of controversy. So, for example, when the requirement is set at $75,000, a plaintiff can claim a breach of contract for $40,000 and a fraud claim for another $40,000, and they would reach the requirement even though those two claims aren't related, because that's $80,000 that exceeds the amount. It's one plaintiff against one defendant. However, there are some times when this doesn't work. So, for example, it doesn't work if two plaintiffs go against one defendant and neither plaintiff on their own meets the amount of controversy requirement. So, for example, if plaintiff A has a claim of $60,000 and plaintiff B has a claim of $60,000 against defendant A, that's not going to work because neither plaintiff A or B reaches the 75 on their own. Likewise, if plaintiff A has a claim of $60,000 against defendant A and another claim against defendant B for $60,000, that's not going to work. You can't just group them together and claim the $120,000 against both and get into federal court. No, it needs to be against one defendant, and the plaintiff on its own needs to exceed that $75,000 limit. Okay, so just going over a couple of rules. A single plaintiff can aggregate claims into a single defendant. A single plaintiff cannot aggregate claims against several defendants even when the claims are related. Multiple plaintiffs can aggregate claims against a single defendant if one of the plaintiffs meets the requirement through supplemental jurisdiction. So that's if plaintiff A has $75,001, and plaintiff B has only $30,000 against defendant A. Well, plaintiff B can join and aggregate that claim with plaintiff A because plaintiff A has met the mounting controversy requirement. And that'll happen through 1367, which we will talk about in the next episode. Finally, last rule is going to be that multiple plaintiffs cannot aggregate claims against a single defendant if neither could state a claim alone, even if those claims are related. And that is the mounting controversy requirement. I kind of went a little longer than I wanted on that, but there you have it. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Law Schoolers. Before I let you go, there are 4 things I want to say. The first thing is if you enjoyed these episodes and if you enjoyed the website, I would invite you to go and join Law Schoolers Pro. And you can do that by going to lawschoolers.com/join. It's a way for you to support us, but there's also a lot of features there that I think you will enjoy. Second thing is that nearly all of our episodes are unedited. The only ones that aren't are pre-law materials, and the reason for that is so you can actually see the legal material in its raw form as I'm learning it as well. The third thing is that the information contained in these episodes are specifically only for educational purposes. They're not to be used as legal advice, and with that, the fourth thing is if it is used as legal advice, we are not liable. That is, Law Schoolers is not liable for any legal outcomes. Thank you again for enjoying the show. Have a good one.